We, ladies and gentlemen, are live. WeatherBrains 4906 for August 3rd, 2015. And a little secret just between us. We're actually recording the show on Friday, July 24th. But the world that listens to the audio show will think it's August 3rd. No, it's a Friday night special. We're doing this, the last time we had a Friday night special, same deal. It was me and Bill and Ginger Z of ABC News. I thought that was a great show.
I'll see you in a minute. Thank
Bill,
you, darling.
okay?
I'm sorry. Am I causing a problem?
Well, I think Bill's ordering a pizza or talking to his girlfriend there. I don't know what's going on. So we muted here Bill for just a second. But anyway, thank you for those that are watching live for the Friday night special. But again, we're going to do a little talking about Katrina. We're getting close to the 10-year anniversary. But if you're new to this, this is the pre-show. This is that magical time where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and occasionally say outrageous things. So I think it's just going to be the two of us, me and Bill, and our guest. Little nice intimate program like we had with Ginger Z. And things get back to normal August the 10th. We are going to do a show live from Norman, Oklahoma. Let's see when that's going to be. That is going to be on August the 17th. So we'll have a regular show on the 10th, and on the 17th, on Monday the 17th, we'll be live from Norman. At least Rick and I will be there. And that'll be a lot of fun. Two of us in one room might be kind of scary. And by the way, thanks to all of our WeatherBrains friends for watching Song of the Night. It's amazing how many of our people have migrated over there. You know, I do local television weather, and after I finish the weather segment, we open up a Periscope live stream, and we play a song. You know, it's silly. Like this is the week we're doing this week, it's Christmas in July. And everybody comments, and we have fun. And the Periscope viewers get to pick it on Friday night. So tonight is Periscope Pickers Night on Song of the Night. And they also get to pick the theme. They picked, I think the worst theme we've had so far on the new iteration of Song of the Night is 90s Boys Band Week. Boy, that was a disaster. But we've had movie soundtrack week. We've had TV theme week. And this is Christmas in July week. And next week, hey, we'll do this. If you're watching us live, just watch my Twitter feed, and we'll open up the Periscope stream about 11:20 Eastern time, 10:20 Central time. So that'll be a ton of fun. All right, so what I'm going to do here is go to my magical email program, and we are going to get our guest on the line with us, and we can get this thing rolling. The nice thing about the non-Monday shows we do, I don't have to work around the cable television. They take this live when we're typically on Monday night, and we kind of try and start and stop at a reasonable time. But we could, heck, Bill, we could make this run till 2 a.m.
I still have about 2 hours of forecasting to do, so let's don't.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting 7 days. You know, Brian is out on medical leave for a while, and so you know, it's just these are interesting days. But we will make it. We do this because we love this. We would not do weather if we didn't love it.
Exactly.
So
sleep is
we work some horribly bad hours and deal with some stuff, but it's just part of the game. You know, it's like playing baseball.
And Roberta made it. I'm so excited.
Can you hear us?
Uh-oh, we can't hear her.
Yeah, we cannot hear you, so what you might want to do, there's a little gear up there that says settings. You can click on that and choose the audio device that you're using. And I don't know what audio device you have, but I guarantee you've got one there somewhere. Your video looks good. Yeah, this is exciting. We're leading up to Show 500, Katrina anniversary. Wow, it's August is going to rock here. 10-year anniversary of the show. Wow. Uh,
All right,
Can't
she's
believe we've
muted.
been
I'll
doing
mute
this.
it. Muted.
And now you are muted. If you can unmute, there's a little microphone button up there, and you are now unmuted, but we are not hearing you. And we can live without the video, but we have to have the audio since most people listen to this show. In fact, people say, I look better with mine turned off. I need to get me a slick-looking picture. I think all my pictures have that point thing. Yeah, so yeah, don't miss Song of the Night. That's a lot of fun, but you know, with kind of short-staffed, I'm going to be working a TV shift this weekend. I'll be working Sunday night, so we're going to do Song of the Night on my stream Sunday night, and be up early tomorrow and Sunday. But I get up early Sunday morning anyway, but to do some radio stuff. But yeah, we've got a lot of things happening. I'll be on the road. The reason we're doing the WeatherBrains episodes, we're doing 3 this weekend. By the way, to my knowledge, I do not believe we've ever done 3 shows in 1 week. So this is like a record. But again, next week on Monday, I will be in St. Louis. Be going to a Cardinals. It's our annual baseball junket. We're going to a Cardinals-Reds game at Busch Stadium, and while I'm there, I'll be dropping by to see my friends at KMOV, Channel 4, the CBS affiliate there. Many of you might know my good friend, my former boss here, Mike Murphy, is now the general manager at Channel 4. And it'll be good to see Mike. I've not seen Mike since he has left a few months ago, so we'll be there Monday of next week. And then that first, the August 3rd, we'll be in Boston. And boy, so this is interesting. So let me do a screen share here while they're working out the audio issues. This is like really interesting here. So let me put up Safari, and that's our that's the email we get from Bill. But this is what's fun. Oh yeah, oh yeah. So there you go. So this is Saturday. So we are planning on being at Fenway for the game Friday night and the game Saturday. So Kevin, here's my situation. See that nice picture? That's the European, valid Saturday, August 1st.
I've heard of the European.
And we are scheduled to be at Fenway for a baseball game. That'll be fun. And you know, we have dugout seats, row 1.
Oh.
I mean, right by the Red Sox dugout, and we're gonna have a hurricane just east of Cape Cod if that verifies. So.
My advice is do not buy one of those little umbrella hats that kind of
yeah, woo! Yeah. That'll be.
You won't keep that very long.
No, that'll be up in Nova Scotia if I buy one of those things. So. Yeah. But you know, we're scheduled to be there Friday night and then Saturday, and then we come back. And of course, and let me look. And I think people that watch this show understands the limitation of numerical weather prediction. 8 days in advance. We are totally in voodoo out here, but the idea of something brewing is certainly on the table. So, Kev, what you going to do for fun this weekend?
Will you be tweeting from Fenway?
If we got that, I probably will.
Yes.
I'm
emceeing the Watermelon Fest in beautiful downtown Wichita Falls tomorrow morning.
So the question is, do they have a watermelon seed spitting contest?
Yes, actually, it's at 10 o'clock. Matthew is very excited because he just got his braces off, and so he's all greased up and ready to go to launch watermelon seeds.
Wow, man! Back in the day, I could do that, but my watermelon, my seed spitting ability is weakened in my old age.
To hear, and then I have it's date night for tomorrow night. And then we have some of Matthew's Dallas-Fort Worth friends, 3 boys coming to spend several days starting on Sunday.
Wow, a house full of boneheads.
Yeah, Tracy's quite worried. She's bought everything at the store because she's learning that 14-year-old boys eat. And so You have to stock up.
And they have hormone problems that age. Kind of like me. I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I'm going through male menopause. So see,
Oh, well, that's
you
too much
have-
information right there.
well, yeah. See, that could be a show title. I mean, already house full of boneheads, male menopause. We have all kind of show titles here. So, no, I think I've cried more in the last 2 years than I've cried in my entire life.
Really?
Yeah, it's got to be some kind of hormone problem here. But I was driving down the road listening to. Remember Kim Cross, the author we had on the show here, wrote the book,
Yes.
about the
Yes.
April 27th. So I was listening to the Audible.com
Oh,
version.
well, yeah, that you can't. That anybody would cry at that, especially
I,
after what
I
you went
just
through.
I just had a good cry driving down the road. I'm thinking people are going to think I'm nuts.
Yeah, but you know what? You probably had to hold a lot of that in for a long time too, and it's just
Yeah, there's a lot of baggage there, and our Ryan, who is our youngest son, starts at the University of Alabama next month in Tuscaloosa. So
Yeah, why were you having to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning for that?
as freshman oriented, you have to be there at like 8. So, and I've got 3 hours worth of production I do in the morning. So I had to get up at 3 o'clock to get that done, so we could be down there at 8.
So what do you? I mean, I interrupted you. I'm sorry. You were going somewhere with him starting.
I was just going to say, what happened. I was listening to the chapter on the University of Alabama students that died, and it's pretty heavy. Even if you don't have a direct impact to that thing, it's pretty heavy.
Mhm.
And when you do have an impact, and that your son's about to go down there, and
Yeah.
you're just in the middle of all this, it's pretty
No,
heavy.
we were talking here. The weekend guy and I were talking. I was telling him about the. And stop me if this is too personal, but the navigation errors in Tuscaloosa that day from WSI, and I know you took that very hard and personal.
I did.
Yeah,
it was nasty.
That was a big toll.
It's something that you will carry to the grave, and again, it's a learning thing. I mean, and for those that don't know what we're talking about, there was a displacement of the radar pixels by about 5 miles that day, and it was a systemic problem. It was everybody had it that used the same equipment, and it's a major vendor, it's WSI. I mean, we talked about it on the show here before, but that caused me to say some things that just weren't true, and I'm afraid that it led some people to take the wrong course of action, which resulted in loss of life. And at this age, you kind of learn to let that roll off to some degree, but it's something you carry with you. But again, you have to learn from it. And what do you learn? You never just have one source of radar in a situation like that. You've got whatever it is, if it's Gibson Ridge or radar scope or something with you that is accurate to complement your broadcast system. And And
you're what, 83 now, right?
83 years old. Yeah, I am.
So what are you going to do?
93.
What are you going to do? Are you just going to stop everything, or are you going to at some point will just disappear, or are you going to start to scale back? And the follow-up question is, I forgot what it was. Answer the first one.
Well, I think, and I'm 59, so I can see myself working for maybe 8 more years doing this. But I think when I stop, I want to do it cold turkey. I don't want to just stop and maybe still dabble in radio or dabble in this. If I do it, I want to do it right. And I don't want to go out just weak and watered down products and, not serving the people well. I would rather just stop. And, what I'll do in about 5 years and again, we're just, hey, this is not on the audio show. This is for those watching on the YouTube here, and it is on the cable television. They'll probably roll this up. Be careful. But my deal ends in 2 years. My television deal. I signed a long-term deal with the Albritton family that owned this station for years and years and years. And at the end of 2 years, I'll have one decision to make. Do I stay here? Do I go to another TV station? I'm not moving markets. My next move when it comes to moving, it's to the cemetery. But do you go to another station here? Do you decide to do your own thing where you're not on television anymore? You have your own apps and your own stream and your own everything else. That's something I could do. And I've got 2 years to figure that out, but 2 years will come by pretty quick. And I'll be 61 when that happens. And I think I could go to 65, 66, but and I look back at some of those, that have, come a long way. I look at Gary England. I think Gary was great. He was sharp until the time he got off television. And I think Gary was in his 70s. And I was in Dallas when Harold Taft on Channel 5 was still on the air, and I thought he was very sharp, and he was in his 70s. But I just don't think doing it in my 70s is for me. My wife has been a weather widow for a long, long time, and I would like to travel with her and see the world. We're empty nesters all of a sudden here next month, and this is a harsh, harsh business, and I just want to spend some good quality time with her. So, how about you? So, Kevin, let me turn the tables. When will you?
No,
retire?
I'm not done. So what I think we ought to do. So we're about to hit 500 on these shows, right?
Yep.
And when we cross over, and this is all on you, unfortunately, but it's time for you to start transferring your knowledge.
Well,
saying going over what you do, not just the fact that you get up at X and you do radio, but the tools that you're using and things like that. And
by the way, can you unplug you got that weird audio thing?
I do, really? That's surprising. I've never had that.
Unplug and play. I've never heard you have that on your audio stream before.
It must be yours. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Maybe it's me. Hang on here. Let me do something here. Hang on.
I can get out and go back in.
I think it was me. I think it was audio hijacked. That was weird. Now, say something.
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, no, that was me. That was apparently everything coming back on the Hangout had that weird noise. Strange. No, you're right. I mean, because look, it's complicated now because I'm going to be gone on a couple of trips and I'm having to bring in, Bill Murray here on the show, and Ryan Stinnett, and JP, my oldest son, and others to do this stuff that I'm just doing by myself. And I would like to have a nice plan set up to where when I leave, it's not a burden, for all these things we do. And all that needs to be thought out. I'm in pretty good health. That's I
also mean the workflow. Like what I think you said before. Are you exclusively using Twitterific?
No.
But that's one.
Yeah. I'm using Tweetbot.
Tweetbot. Mostly that, or?
Yeah, Tweetbot. I like that. Again, it just works for me, and I'm not saying there's a right or wrong solution, but it syncs across all your devices, so where you stop on a tablet or a phone, it's got it on your computer or any of the devices that you're using, and it's very robust, and I use lists extensively.
Mm-hmm.
I follow, 60,000 people, and if you just look at that's not good. It's just you can't even read it. It's just if you've got it in the streaming mode. So I've got a news list and I've got a weather list, and I've probably got 10 different lists. And you can see this all up there on my Twitter account. You can see those lists. And with Tweetbot, I've got the columns set up like TweetDeck, and it's just very effective. And on the phone and the tablet, it works very well. And I've not had any trouble with it. And it seems like Twitter is welcoming back those third-party developers. For a while, it's like they were shutting them out. You got to a certain number, and then they just shut you down. And so, but I think the new Twitter philosophy is to embrace third-party developers. So I think they're going to be okay. Hey, tap on your mic. I might have boogered you up when I said.
You may get out and come back in again.
It's like I don't think you're on the right mic.
And it unplugged. It probably didn't.
Because typically your audio is really good.
Back to the thing.
Now that's whatever you just did is back.
Yeah, it went back to the other one when I unplugged. I was fine until you started messing with
the chat.
Exactly. Bill, you okay there?
Yeah, check the chat. We're going to go to a different Google Plus account real quick, and you've got the invite address there.
I just invited that one into the hangout. As soon as we get our guest up here, we'll start the show. I promise. This might be the longest pre-show ever. I'm pouring out my retirement plans. I'm pouring out everything here.
I can't. I end up not being able to do anything except the pre-show and picks.
Yeah, no. I have great fear that a 9 o'clock news is going to creep in here at some point, 9 o'clock Central, and that is going to booger me up. Because, we have now 3 stations, 3 full-power stations. We've got the ABC channel that I've worked for forever. And, of course, if you're an ABC channel, there's no 9 o'clock news. But we've got 2 others now.
Oh, are they putting something else on the 33 and the 40?
Well, no. I mean, we've got channel 68 and channel 21.
Oh,
and,
so I don't know all of this when it switched over.
Yeah, so Sinclair owned those 2 stations. Hello, who's this?
Okay, I'm speaking now.
Who's this?
You can hear us?
Yeah, this
Can you
is
hear me?
this is Sherry Fink, James, who is Roberta's friend and has hooked her up. So.
Okay, but now I'm going to plug in. I think I'm better with this. So it's only. Oh.
I think the show we did, the midweek show with the retired MIC, that was all. When he put his phone up to his ear, we were seeing his ear hair. I mean, we had this close-up look of it's like you can almost see his eardrum through that thing. I'm thinking, wow, that was a great show. I mean, that guy was great. That was one of the most.
Because he wrote me and he said, "I'm sorry, I was such a technological fail tonight." And I was like, "No, you were one of the greatest guests we've ever had." So
I really thought that was one of the most interesting shows we've done. And he didn't beat around the bush, man. He's just usually these retired weather service guys, they kind of hold back. He didn't hold back. He just let it all hang out. That was awesome.
I haven't listened to it yet. I had to do my TV. I didn't get to hear him.
yeah, his pension checks have been discontinued now.
I'm about to say he's going to lose his retirement. But that show's not going to be
Roberta
put up.
for a second, James. James,
Hello?
Roberta, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
James, is that level good enough for you?
Yeah, sounds
Oh
good
my
to me.
goodness.
All right,
You can
good.
hear me?
Well, let's roll it here. See, while you guys were talking, I poured out my retirement plan, but Kevin just grilled me, so I
Did you
wore
take good notes, Kevin?
Yeah.
Are you
I
sending
wore
over to AL.com or what?
I didn't learn anything, but I listened for a long time.
So, all right. So we've got Sherry Fink's account with Roberta on the camera. That'll be very confusing to me, but I'll make it work. So let me get the recorders going here. Let's get this thing started here.
Your last chance to hang up, Roberta.
I'm about to say,
After
run
all
for your.
this- After all this, you're not going to leave me.
It's the last exit for 60 minutes. You better belt in.
All right. So what I'm doing now, and we're going to turn on the audio recorders here, so we can get the official podcast recorded. All right. So here we go in 5, 4, 3. Oh, and by the way, this is WeatherBrains 496. Producer JP, this is 496, and here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. WeatherBrains! Weather is the subject of this program. It must be something that you hold dear to your heart because you're listening to us. This is WeatherBrains, episode number 496 for August 3rd. 2015. Boy, a lot of cool things are happening. We're zeroing in on show 500. We are zeroing in on the anniversary of Katrina. We are zeroing in on the 10th anniversary of this show. Goodness gracious. Well, and again, we're transparent here. I'll just say up front, we are actually recording this show on Friday, July 24th. It's a Friday night special. And some of the best work we've done, it's come on the Friday night special. So, Kevin?
Yeah, what you didn't tell them is it's the year 2013.
Yeah, we're doing this one really far in advance. Yeah. So Kevin, what's happening up in the fall? So tell me about this watermelon festival thing you're doing. Oh, Kevin. Kevin just went away. Wow. He's frozen right there. That could be his new profile pic. Well, Bill, go ahead. Bill Murray's here. Bill, bring in our guest.
Yeah, James. Tonight's guest, WeatherBrain, is an acclaimed urbanist and a writer who splits her time between New York City and New Orleans. She's the author of the book, We're Still Here, You Bastards, about the rebuilding of the Crescent City, Roberta Brandis Gratz, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here.
Well, Roberta, you're.
Technology has worked.
I'm glad our test went perfectly today, and then of course we get you on the show and the gremlins take over. So unfortunately we had to switch Google Plus accounts, but it worked. So we're here, and we're sure glad you're with us tonight. So I have my Cafe Du Monde coffee mug in honor of your visit tonight.
Wow.
So,
But do you have the beignet that goes with it?
no, or I would have white powder all over my face. So that would be Powdered Sugar City. But anyway, is there a story behind the title, Roberta?
The story behind the title is that that was a real graffiti. We're still here, you bastards. Was a graffiti that I saw soon after Katrina, and it was put up by some young New Orleanians who basically expressed the feelings for the whole city, and it's the title just stuck because they felt it then, and they feel it even stronger now. If you remember back after Katrina, there were a lot of experts predicting the city would not come back, could not come back, should not come back, or should come back smaller, or all sorts of predictions. And the citizens of New Orleans did not agree, and they made sure that they came back.
Well, one thing.
So, Roberta, I'm sorry, Bill, let me interrupt just because we're on the title thing, because it struck me. You must have had a conversation about it. Were you at all afraid that title immediately pulls forth a hostile tone to the book?
No, that wasn't my fear at all. I was a little uncomfortable with it at first. I have to say that it was my editor who thought that should be the title, and it started very early because in my early draft of the introduction, I quoted a number of wonderful graffitis that I had seen, and he said, "That's it. We're still here, you bastards." And I said, "Really? I mean, I don't know." And I lived with it for close to 10 years, and I tried it on people, and particularly on New Orleanians, and they laughed. They said, "Oh, I love the title." I mean, there's a spirit in that city that has just never been recognized, and the graffiti kind of just summed it all up.
Well, I appreciate your answering that because it struck me, but then hearing it in context makes me understand why. I'm sorry, Bill, go ahead.
No, Kevin, that's great. Thank you.
And of course, the tagline is, "We're still here, you bastards, how the citizens of New Orleans rebuilt their city." They really do go together because first they're saying, we're still here and we did it despite what your expectations. And we did it, in many ways that defied the experts, defied expectations. And that's a real summation of the story.
So, Roberta, you're an urbanist, and talk about what that means and what an urbanist does.
Well, I've been writing about cities for more than 40 years, and what I've been writing is how cities grow, fall apart, regrow, revitalize, and at the same time, I'm an advocate on behalf of urbanism that is very much now understood as we're increasingly understanding what cities are and need to be. But you have to remember when I started writing about these things in the early 70s, actually the late 60s, cities were dead. Cities were over. It was only the suburbs, and no one was expected to want to stay in cities. So it took advocates and believers like myself and my family to say that's not true. We're staying because we like urban life. But urban life is different from suburban or rural life, and only now is that recognized. I mean, some of the things that are mainstream today, the rebirth of main streets, the pedestrianization of downtowns, the understanding of the value of public spaces, the understanding of neighborhoods, and and how they function and how urban economies actually work. These are all, they were just nowhere in the 70s. They had gone out basically after World War II, when the idea was, you know, cities were over. We won the war. We won it with all these, you know, great new advances, and it included cars and highways and new suburbs and new shopping malls, and we demolished much too much of the cities that we had. So a lot of cities struggle today to become the urban places they all now understand they want to be. We certainly tore up all the mass transit that we used to have, the streetcars. I mean, we're putting back that kind of infrastructure now very expensively. When you think of what we had and destroyed, it is taking an unfortunate toll to bring back a semblance of what we now understand, or hopefully understand, makes an urban place.
Now, you talk about in the book that New Orleans escaped some of that urban renewal because of the oil bust in the 80s. Talk about what an urbanist looked and saw when they looked at New Orleans prior to Katrina, and then we'll compare and contrast, you know, with the efforts that are going forward. So first talk about before the storm. What did you see when you looked at New Orleans?
Well, what I saw in New Orleans before Katrina is fortunately much of what I still see in New Orleans. And what's really astounded me was how urban that city is. And I go in detail in the book to point out that it's what seems like a low density city, but it's high density on low scale, with a street grid that is just spectacular. The traffic, cars, streets go two-way with parking on both sides calmly. You know, we call it now traffic calming. Well, in New Orleans, it's there. But you have a grid that allows you to go in many different directions without having to funnel into highways, and it allows residential population to live comfortably with small businesses. You have corner stores, which every city used to have, and most eliminated. You have small businesses and restaurants comfortably on residential streets. This is a real definition of mixed use. You have churches and schools and all these things woven together in an urban fabric that has not been torn asunder as it has been in so many other cities. That's not to say New Orleans escaped entirely from urban renewal and a lot of the demolition. You see downtown, a lot of areas that were totally wiped out are now just getting built, transformed from parking lots. There's barely anything left of the early fabric that where jazz was born. We just destroyed so much of that historic fabric. But despite what's been lost, what is amazing is what still remains. So it really shocked me when I had been there before. I had written about New Orleans, actually, in two different books, used examples of New Orleans at the time. In my first book, which was published in 1978, I cited the downtown Via Carré, showing how you could have both comfortable residential neighborhood not far from honky-tonk, and how they could coexist. And at the time, that was true. It's not so true anymore. It's been eroded. Unfortunately, the city policies have not held firm to control the spread of the, the tourist city. So the residential is highly diminished. But it was a good example at that time. And then subsequently, I wrote about the Garden District, and what saved the Garden District was the streetcar. the St. Charles streetcar. This Garden District in the 1970s was quite decayed, deteriorated, but that streetcar kept going. So it maintained the mix of uses in along the corridor that included everything from universities to businesses to other institutions, residential, all mixed in together. And the Garden District now, of course, is, you know, the Park Avenue of New Orleans, but it was held together by that transit. And we learned that lesson. Some cities have learned that lesson enough to be trying to rebuild transit, and successfully where it's actually happening. So New Orleans has a lot of examples of things that should be done again because they hadn't been lost, and shows the value of their survival. And all those things were there before Katrina and still are.
And Roberta, I know Kevin wants to ask you some things about their downtown in Wichita Falls, and we'll come back to that in just a second. But were you a fan of the television show on HBO called Treme?
I was indeed.
I love that show, and we've been going back and watching it recently. But you know, some of those storylines, you know, absolutely followed truth. Of course, John Goodman, you know, in the first season, who commits suicide, you know, was an example of, you know, the mental health effects of the storm. So talk about, you know, what you learned about the effects of the storm on people in the city, and you know how they coped with that, and then, you know, came through and eventually began to thrive again.
Well, first of all, we can't put it entirely in past tense. There's still a residual impact. In fact, it's very interesting as the anniversary date comes closer. There are people saying, you know, I'm getting out of town. I don't want to have to live through this again. The media is going to descend and bring back all the memories. And I think the most important thing that has been lost, and the city is paying a price for it, is the mental health impact on the children at that time. Because, and I have a scene in the book that is really quite poignant, where after a funeral, not long after Katrina, the woman that I'm writing about comes out on the porch and looks down the street and sees a group of young children, all black children, playing at what should have been a school day, and those kids lost so much time, and they've had a rough time since. The education system is still debated today. For some it's great, for some it's not. And she says, or someone says, you know, where are those kids today? They're killing each other. A lot of the crime today stems from the residual impacts on the mental health of the kids then and the adults. And the real crime is that the hospital that used to have so much, gave such good care for mental health, was closed. I have a whole chapter on the travesty of closing of Charity Hospital. And the hospital they're finally opening 10 years later, much too expensively and unnecessarily, will not have mental health services at all. When somebody is found disturbed, they call the police on the street or something, a disturbed person gets sent to jail. That's where the mental health impact is. We use jail to take care of mental health. This is just, it's just inhuman. So mental health is still a very big issue. And while so much of what I write in the book is positive in terms of the rebuilding of the city, I try not to ignore or gloss over the negatives.
Well, one of the storylines in Treme, of course, is about the corruption and brutality of the police in New Orleans, and that's still an issue today to some degree. Talk about how that has progressed and what you write about in your book on that subject.
Well, crime is as intractable as ever the only real difference, there are some differences in details that that add up to some difference, but the main thing is that there is a federal monitor overseeing now the police department, and this has been critical because it's been necessary for bringing in some semblance of stability in the department. At the same time, with the whole bringing in of the federal monitor and certain rules being put in place, the morale fell. A lot of the police retired rather than live by the new rules, and so they're understaffed, and it's very slow in bringing in new ones, new recruits. So this is very much a work in progress. I wouldn't say that it's as bad as it used to be, but it's not at any point now where one would say it's really over the worst of it.
So Roberta, there were people who, right after the hurricane said, we shouldn't rebuild New Orleans. And of course, people who have an affinity or a love for that city, like many of us in the South, because we, all vacation there and spend lots of time there, and it's important to us, as Southerners. What would you have said as an urbanist to that group that said maybe New Orleans shouldn't come back, or that it should have been greatly mitigated, in the areas, beyond the flood walls?
There's no, one can never overestimate what kind of stupid ideas will emerge after anything. I mean, how do you say a city shouldn't come back or be rebuilt? First of all, the whole damn country, the economy of the country is so dependent on your whole region, the whole southeast, the Gulf, all the ports in the southeast. I mean, where would everybody be? I mean, this is, it's just, I don't know where to begin with that kind of thing. Forget the fact that it's a city that everybody loves to go to. Forget the fact that this tradition of music and culture and food and everything is so important and unique in this country. Forget all that. Economically, it's just absurd to even discuss that. And those who, frankly, it was a bias that really doesn't even deserve to be acknowledged.
And there are probably some other examples of bias that you touch on in the book. Talk about the demographics of the population and about how some of the economic inequalities have led to some unfair things in your view and in the view of some other experts.
Well, it was clear from the very beginning there were built-in inequities in the way the system was structured on the rebuilding, so that too many of the low-income, primarily black population, were unable and are still unable to return. The biggest inequity, I would say, started with the road home valuation of everybody's home. It was valued on its pre-Katrina value. Now, if you had a shotgun in the lower Ninth Ward that was worth $70,000,
and you mean a shotgun home?
Shotgun home, or any kind of house.
Right.
I only use the shotgun house form because you find it all over town. But if you had one in the lower Ninth Ward that was worth $70,000, and you had the exact same structure in the Garden District, $250,000, Road Home would reimburse you based on those numbers. Now, you can assume that the homeowner in the $70,000 home does not have a big savings account, so that if he gets $35,000 from road home toward, and that's assuming he gets that much. He's going to need that home to be rebuilt today will be $250,000. Where is he going to get that extra money? Now, a lot of the people who had mortgages on their homes, the banks all, surprise, surprise, the banks all did great because the federal money for road home was funneled through the state. The state funneled the money local through the banks. So if I was entitled to road home money on my, say, my $200,000 house, and I had a $75,000 mortgage, that $75,000 stayed in the bank, and I got whatever was left. That meant I needed considerable private funds to be able to rebuild. That's the first way that low-income homeowners have not been able to return, although many have with the help of hundreds of nonprofit organizations and volunteers. This has been an extraordinary story on that in that regard. The other inequity was the demolition of 4 major public housing projects, which never could have happened if Katrina hadn't provided the disaster to give them cover, because they vacated those public housing projects, even though they were not flooded. There was some mild damage, some flooding in one project on the first floor, not enough to declare unbuildable. And they were incredible buildings from the early 1940s, red brick buildings with solid wood floors and tile roofs and all kinds of amenities that would be landmarks in any other place and were the model for garden apartments in the suburbs. They were not only not reopened, none of those people were allowed back into their homes except to finally to get their belongings and go. Some of them got Section 8 vouchers to go elsewhere, and some of them are still in limbo. And what's been rebuilt in their place are mixed economic units, and they have not replaced yet, 10 years later, the promised number of public housing units. So there is an estimated anywhere, I mean, I've seen the number of 100,000 low-income people unable to come back, and I don't know if that's accurate, but even if they're 50,000, that's too many 10 years later. So you've got that issue. The division between black and white is less. It used to be 67% black. I think it's now 63% black. The population has changed with a lot of new young, primarily white, entrepreneurial or music loving kids moving in. And that's had its both good news and bad news in terms of, prices are going up, making it harder for locals to find new housing. So there's still plenty of inequities, even though there is a vibrancy in the population and a great new energy with a lot of the people moving in. It's not all negative, but it does have its consequences.
So, Roberta, talk to me as an urbanist for a minute about why gentrification is a bad thing. I mean, cities like Birmingham are fighting really hard to get these young, vibrant, professionals to move back into their downtowns, and it's working here. Why is that a bad thing in New Orleans, and why is gentrification generally reviled in cities like New York and New Orleans, places like that?
Well, first of all, it's not defined as a bad thing or reviled by me. I write in this book, and I've written it before, gentrification is much more complex than it is treated in most places. The opposite of gentrification is continued decay, and there is no such thing as no change. That doesn't happen. I mean, change happens, and it goes in one direction or another. It never stays the same. People come, people go. The problem with gentrification is not the gentrification of new people moving in. The problem is of displacement of people who have been there for a long time, either as homeowners or as tenants. And what I write in the book is that there are solutions to gentrification, but where it has to have a public commitment to want to pursue the solutions. For example, when new people move in, when prices go up, taxes go up. When property taxes go up, people of limited means find it's too expensive to stay, so they're forced to sell. There are places that know how to defer or limit the tax increase on a yearly basis and defer the increase to the point of sale, so that if you stay for another 20 years, you're going to basically have the same property tax with a reasonable incremental increase. But at the point you sell, you will pay it will come out of your final sale price, because chances are when you sell, you will be cashing in on the improved values. So it's only fair that you should give back some of what you're gaining by those improved values. So that's one way. That's for property owners. For tenants, you can give tax breaks to the property owner in exchange for a voluntary cap on the rental increase. So it's a, by choice, form of rent control. There are other options. The point is, the tax breaks and subsidies that cities tend to give go in big chunks to the developers, the real estate people, the people in, with the right political connections. It would be much cheaper if it were done this way and given to individuals. But, this is more about politics than it is about the real issue, because the real issue is it's possible to deal with it in an appropriate way.
Now, Roberta, you referred to the hundreds of nonprofits that have done great work in New Orleans, and one of those is surrounds actor Brad Pitt and the Make It Right program. Talk about what you saw good with that program, what sort of problems it's had, and how it's working right now.
Well, I use the Brad Pitt example as a real example of how to deal with the rebuilding of a low-income community, bringing in the community as a real partner, doing it with them, not for them, not in a paternalistic, top-down way. I go into great detail because this has never been done that I have seen anywhere in the country that I've been writing about this issue. I mean, just to start, they held a design competition and came up with 13 final designs. And someone said to Pitt, well, now you need a credentialed jury to select the final design or designs. And he said, why? Let the homeowners choose. Where have you ever heard of a low-income homeowner being given a choice in the subsidized home that they are about to occupy? Now, they pay what they can afford. They donate the land. Their destroyed house was sat on, so their new house is on the same property. They get grants, and because the homes are so environmentally up to date technologically, the carrying costs are much less than what they had in their old homes. So there are many ways in which they really worked with the community. They responded to the community. They built where the community asked them to build. It was the most destroyed area in the lower nine, the one area that every expert, every planner, every business person and politician said, oh, don't rebuild the lower nine where the levee broke. Well, it wasn't that that area was any lower than any other in terms of sea level. It was because that's where the breach occurred and the barge came through and wiped out the whole area. So there are
Well, and if it hadn't been for the MRGO in that area, you wouldn't have probably had that breach, most likely.
you wouldn't have had that breach. Well, it's hard. It wasn't Mr. Go only. I mean, that's where the surge came, but you know, 53 spots, 53 sections of the levees around the city broke. That is what flooded the city. We have to make sure people understand this was not a natural disaster. This was a man-made disaster created by the failure of the Corps of Engineers to build the levees properly. The storm was over. The water was receding. And that's why so many people got trapped. And I tell stories in the book of people who went home thinking it was over. And people say, well, why didn't they leave? Well, as a lot of the low-income people said to me, you know, for years we were told we should leave. And we get everybody in the car, we leave town, we spend money on gas we can't afford. We spend money in restaurants we can't afford. We spend money at motels we can't afford. We lose work we can't afford. We come back and there's nothing. So there's, you know, no damage. So a lot of them were very reluctant to leave. And then there would have been no reason for them. It would have been just another storm if the levees had not breached.
So, Roberta, we were
very important point.
We were there that Saturday night, and I wrote a blog post about 10:30 excoriating Mayor Nagin for not making the evacuation mandatory. And how much, you know, Max Mayfield by Friday night, Saturday, all the emergency managers knew this was the storm. It was not going to be a George or, you know, another one of these hurricanes that turned at the last minute. It was coming dead on for New Orleans. If we had beaten the drum better, had used trains, had done other things, you know, could we have gotten more people out of harm's way?
Well, we certainly could have gotten more people out of harm's way because the mayor stupidly rejected offers by the trains. I mean, there are 4 railroad companies that go through New Orleans. They offered to take people out. By the time it dawned on him, and, you know, not just Nagin, everybody around him, nobody said, hey, Mayor, you know, you're missing a great opportunity, at least no one that I heard about. And by the time they decided that that would have been a good idea, the trains were long gone and all the personnel with it. But something you said is not really correct. The fact is, the levees are what breached. Mm-hmm. The storm, a lot of the people that stayed would not have been flooded. That's the, you know, or the waters would have receded like many hurricanes before. So sure, it should have been mandatory. Would there have been people who didn't leave? Of course. And there were people, I mean, I tell the story in the Make It Right story of a guy in one of those in Brad Pitt houses. You know, he and his family left, but his ailing mother got so sick they turned around and came back. A lot of the people who didn't leave had elderly or disabled members of their family who couldn't travel so easily, and many of them perished.
So Roberta, we're 10 years later, and very lucky that we haven't had another hurricane, because another hurricane could have been the coup de grace. I mean, Rita was a glancing blow, but in 10 years we haven't had another major threat. So what has happened in that 10 years in rebuilding the levees, and are we prepared for another major hurricane if one comes that way?
Well, the good news is that the levees have been rebuilt, at least the ones that we know were either compromised or damaged. There's a beginning of the kind of living with water understanding that needs to really be accelerated in every vulnerable city. And the idea of living with water, which comes from the Dutch, is creating places that during a storm hold the water. And when the water recedes, they're outdoor, recreation spaces, parks, and backyards. There used to be, it used to be not an uncommon thing to have those kind of, opportunities in Northeast New Orleans. There are a lot of the homes are built around small lakes, and they become holding places, absorbent places for overflow. So there are ways to do this. Some people are building it into their landscape. There are some areas of the city where they're experimenting with creating these places. It needs to be done on a bigger scale. I think the main difference is that if something happens big, and God help us, hopefully not this year at least, people will leave town, I think, perhaps quicker than they did last time.
So Roberta, it seems to me that one of the very bad decisions that was made 25 or 30 years ago was that gates were not put at the entrances to the canals. So where do you put that blame, and has that been corrected?
Yeah, that's been corrected. So the gates are now in, and it is something that the citizenry rejected for environmental reasons, I believe, and I don't really know enough about that. I wasn't there at the time, and I didn't really go into great research on it. But it was an oversight, it was a mistake, and that's been corrected. So there are things in place now that weren't before, and hopefully that would make a difference, among other things, of course.
Go back and compare and contrast the response from President Johnson in 1965 after Betsy and the response of President Bush in 2005.
It's like night and day. Johnson showed up, I don't know whether it was a day or two later, and said, "I'm here to help." And he ordered the Corps of Engineers to build levees as strong as they needed to be. President Bush, famously flew low on his way back from a Texas vacation to Washington, appeared, I don't remember whether it was 4 or 5 days later or maybe a week later the first time, and it was shameful. I mean, there's no other way to put it. And furthermore, what was also shameful, and I go into detail in the book on this, is the money that then allegedly poured into New Orleans, poured into contractors, the same kind of contractors that rebuilt or cashed in on Iraq. They were contractors who then subcontracted and subcontracted again until the guys on the ground doing the work got pennies in comparison to the sums spent. And if you take out the billions put into the levees, I'll use one particular example. the blue tarp roof material, the squares, the original contractor got $75 a square. I think it was, I don't even know if I have my numbers right. It doesn't matter. But that gets subcontracted for 60 some odd dollars and gets subcontracted again 30 some odd dollars. Not one bit of work has yet happened. The guy on the ground gets $2 a square to install it. That money goes out, stays out of New Orleans and out of state. And aside from the levy money, I maintain, just based on the contracts that I looked at and included in the book, I would venture to say maybe 20%, and that might be generous, of the money spent, so-called spent, on the rebuilding of New Orleans from the federal government, maybe 20% landed in New Orleans, and about 80% went to contractors out of state who had no experience or background in the work that they were getting a contract for, until the guys on the ground got, you know, maybe $2 instead of the $75 or $100. And some of those guys on the ground then went bankrupt because the payments to them were so delayed and often diminished that they collapsed. I mean, it was a travesty.
So you referred earlier just briefly to the state of public education versus charter education. Expand on that for a minute, how that's unfolded and what you see the pros and cons to both sides are.
Well, as I tell people, that's the one chapter in which I'm somewhat equivocal. I'm not a charter school fan for all sorts of reasons. I'm not happy with the way they threw the baby out with the bathwater. And it is not yet proven that they are serving the full population as they should be, and not a lot of good things happening, but not on the level that is equitable. However, one has to concede the old system was terrible. It should not have been blamed on the teachers, who were all fired totally. I'm tired of hearing school failures all blamed on teachers. So there's on the one hand this and on the one hand that when it comes to the school system. But it is not as good as the press releases would maintain it. And there are some of the schools are brilliant, don't get me wrong. But there are also plenty that are lagging behind and are just being brought along on the reputation of the good ones. And some of them are closing due to failure.
So, Kevin, we've given you so much to ask about. I know you were away a good bit of the time, but you wanted to talk about some of the things that we brought up earlier. So, Kevin, you got the floor.
Oh, well, I hate that I couldn't listen. I'm sorry. I was off doing the 9 o'clock show, but I was very interested in your comments early, talking about, you know, just cities in general. I'm in Wichita Falls, and among other things that have happened in this city over the years, which was a real boomtown in the early 1900s, due in large part to oil, a lot of that has fallen away, and the downtown area has fallen into, like many downtowns, kind of disrepair and unuse and things like that. But there's a little bit of a resurgence now. A lot of that was or is being blamed on the mall that was put up in the mid-'70s, and that effectively killed all the old great downtown department stores. But the other thing, one of the other big things that happened was a big F5 tornado back in 1979. And as you look around here, and that one didn't go through right downtown, it was the southwestern suburbs, but as you look around here, you can kind of see that there's a gap in the 80s and 90s in the architecture and construction and things like that. And there's been a resurgence in the maybe late 90s, but definitely the 2000s and over the last couple of years of newer development. But I think that tornado maybe took the wind out of a lot of people's sails, and it lasted for maybe, close to 2 decades. But I'd love to hear your comments on that.
Well, I've never been to Wichita Falls, but I have to say in my earlier books, I wrote about the phenomenon of the rebirth of towns and cities like you're describing that were bypassed by the highway, almost drained by the mall, small businesses falling apart. The good news is if there's the infrastructure of the downtown, of the main street left, if there's some of the historic buildings left, if there's something to restore, that's where it usually begins. There now are examples all over the country of these kind of places that have been reborn one building at a time,
Yes.
one small business at a time. They build on each other. And there are a lot of success stories to learn from, and I would never give up hope that it can happen, because one of the real important phenomenon is that people want to be in downtowns again. They want to walk streets. They don't want to only drive to the mall. So there is a desire for going to places like this. You just need the right spark to get it started, and the commitment of the right citizens to get behind it.
And forgive me if you've covered this already, but what I see here, and I'd love to know what's going on in New Orleans, even though it's a much bigger town and it had a much, much, much different personality of its own. What I see here is the things that happen first are what I call sort of kitschy, smaller, antique type stores or offbeat things. Those seem to be first, and then along with that there seems to be some residential development, and the people that move there are younger and I hate to use the word, but hipster type, that somehow the idea of living downtown seems to be the cool thing, and there's some attraction by the older buildings. Is that what you see there?
Yes, and often they're happy to renovate a building and live on the second floor. And if there's a coffee shop or a restaurant, this is the life people are looking for. They want to walk to these kind of places, and a lot of young people today are willing, if the cost of renting a place is right, they'll open their own store. That sometimes it's crafts, sometimes it's antiques, sometimes it's a new business of some sort.
And it's almost the resurgence of the mom and pop store as opposed to the big chain. I don't know if that. I guess there's not a. Well, I mean, Starbucks maybe is kind of like that. I'm sorry, Bill. Go ahead.
No, absolutely, you're right, Kevin.
Because there's a place. There's 8th Street Coffee House here, and the only thing I can compare it to is, just to give somebody a visual, is kind of like the place where all the Friends met on the Friends TV show, the big overstuffed furniture, Central Perk. Yes, thank you very much. But I find that very, very interesting and kind of refreshing. There's a little more personality to it, a little bit more intimateness. Again, they're not necessarily looking to please everybody. They just find their little niche.
Well, you're absolutely right, and it has to be local people doing this, because first of all, local people know how to respond to their neighbors. They know their market. You're not gonna you don't be careful what you wish for. You don't want a Starbucks. You want somebody to open a local coffee shop who knows their clientele, who makes it comfortable for people to come and meet. Whether it's a bookstore next door, one of the smartest things I saw in a downtown, it happened to be in a reviving mall in a big city. They put a dance school in an empty storefront, and next door a coffee shop opened. And it was amazing how many people wanted to just stand in front of the window and watch what was going on. And they would come downtown to do that. And while they were there, they'd go have a cup of coffee, or they'd go shop in the new clothing store or whatever. You need things that create activity and then create places where people want to
Right.
meet, and that's what brings them together.
So is it, and again, forgive me if you've already answered this, but is that's what's happening in New Orleans after Katrina? Is it these smaller little individuals taking care of this rebirth? It's not the bigger organizations, is that right?
The interesting thing was that the ones that reopened and came back immediately were the small businesses, and New Orleans is amazing for how many local shopping streets, neighborhood kind of shopping streets it has, and it has increased the number of local, locally owned and operated stores, even though the city, in my estimation, mistakenly has given tax credits to a couple of big box chains to come in. Yet the real life is on those shopping streets which have local businesses that reopen quickly and are still reopening. They're multiplying. There are more of them today than there were before Katrina. There are more restaurants. There are more night spots. There's more of a lot of what New Orleans had before. There's more now than before Katrina.
But you probably answered this already again, and I apologize. But okay, it's still below sea level, right? And we can't go through this again. Why not just fill up the hole and go somewhere else?
Well, it's not all below sea level, and there are a lot of places in this country below sea level, and there are a lot of vulnerable places. The beaches of Malibu, the forests of Colorado, the developments all over the country that big developers have filled in wetlands, Tornado Alley, and you name it, forest fires. You're talking to me now in a summer home that I have on the island of Fire Island off Long Island. I'm on the bay. I'm in harm's way.
Well, let me play.
So many people live in harm's way.
Yeah. Let me play devil's advocate, though, because New Orleans, and again, I'm playing devil's advocate, is particularly vulnerable. It's been hit once already, and then you look at people like Neil Frank, who was one of the first to say, you know what, it doesn't make it right that everybody else, people are living on the coast in Florida and people are living on the coast here. That doesn't make it right, and he was one of the first to say, you know what, tropical system or climate change, there's going to be a problem here. Why should we keep doing this? How would you defend that? Just because there are other places in danger doesn't make it right. And again, you understand, I'm being a troublemaker.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't know where to begin if you were to take that challenge nationwide, because to be able to say that every place that we could fill up the country, the non-vulnerable places of the country, with all the evacuees from the vulnerable places, it's just bizarre. And remember, and this you did miss earlier, this was not a natural disaster. This was a man-made disaster. The levees failed. The storm was over. The flood was receding. It was receding. The great flood came when the levees collapsed. If we build strong levees, and this is true in every place in this country where there are levees built by the Corps of Engineers, alert, alert, New Orleans is not the only place the levees may not have been built properly.
Right.
Well, and Roberta, there are probably lessons from the Netherlands and the Dutch, as Eleanor pointed out to me. And we've had Ivor Van Heerden on this show before, and he pointed out some of those things, and I think some of that has been incorporated into the new levee design, right?
It's not into the levee design. Well, yes, they've improved the levee design, but it's not. I don't know. A couple of months ago, there were stories. The levees are sinking. Remember the ground. It's very complicated. But the fact is that The levees have to be constantly raised in their height because they're built on very soft soil that subsides as the water disappears. So yes, we need, but, and I think this is a very important point, and I make this in the book, we have to stop depending on these highly engineering solutions. We have to understand, this is where the Dutch came in. You have to build into the landscape your safety zones, your opportunities to hold and absorb the water. It's a little, I make the analogy in the book to the highway system. We kept building and building and building highways. Finally, it is dawning on some parts of the country that we can't build our way out of the traffic jam. There have to be alternatives. And in the last 10 or 15 years, finally, mass transit is gaining an appeal again. Walkability is gaining appeal again. People don't want the car-dependent life. This is the same kind of projection that's happening with the whole levee and flooding system. We have to find alternative ways of dealing with these challenges that don't require only a out of extraordinary sum of money, as well as a technological answer. The interesting thing about the technology issue in New Orleans, there's the whole pumping system, which is both a great asset and an interesting challenge. But one of the things that the study showed that when they started pumping out the water from the city, it actually, the electric cost these days is out of sight. So the expense of this is just made even harder by the increasing cost of the technology. Whereas if you were to absorb more water naturally in the landscape, you wouldn't have the high cost, the same high cost as of the technology.
And so, Roberta, you mentioned that these natural attempts at mitigation are important. And I know one of the things that you point out in your book is that you thought the neutral grounds and the areas in between the major avenues in New Orleans, should be more used as retention. And I wondered if there was a cultural pushback on that, because I know those neutral grounds are really important to the psyche of New Orleanians, especially when it comes to Carnival and Mardi Gras and those sort of things.
Well, you're absolutely right on that. And it's being debated right now because putting back the neutral grounds, because in particularly a couple of places where they've been ripped up to put in larger pipes for the pumping system, now the rebuilding of the neutral ground is in some debate. I don't think the advocates for the living with water approach are not suggesting that all of that land be taken away, because of course they are important sites during Mardi Gras, and there are ways to have dual uses. But there are other opportunities for these kind of places that serve both recreationally and flood absorbent. And there are some in process, even backyards. The idea of bringing back cisterns, the idea of planting natural landscapes, all these ideas are coming back, and each one makes a difference.
All right, Roberta, I can't let you get away without talking for just a moment, educating me about Robert Moses and New York, and And I know that's not weather related, but you're an expert on this subject, and I love New York, so I'd like to hear your opinion on that briefly, and then I have a slide to show you, and then Kevin or James can ask anything else they want to ask.
Well, you've just given me an opportunity to promote the last book before the current New Orleans book. My last book was called The Battle for Gotham, New York in the Shadow of Robert Moses and Jane Jacobs. And what I did in that book was show that there are basically two philosophical directions that people think about cities, and both policy-wise and every other which way. And Robert Moses, in his heyday starting in the 1920s, became a power broker in the state that I don't think the country has ever seen since. He basically ran the state through a whole number of agencies. He wore 11 different hats at one time. He built highways, he demolished neighborhoods. He had a vision of the city as an access route to the suburbs. Highways, cars, and suburbs were all that he really thought about. Cities were an anachronism to him and should be demolished and rebuilt in a very efficient, high-rise way with green spaces all around, you know, tower in the park kind of thing. And the most important thing about Robert Moses is not just what he did, because there will be people tell you, oh, this road is great and that beach is terrific. Not that they couldn't have been done without him, but the important thing was that he was an autocrat. He had no respect for public opinion. He had total contempt for the public he was supposed to be serving. He was a racist of all kinds. He just really had disdain for the public. It was his way or the highway. The means justified the ends. All the things that we know are inappropriate as a way to deliver any kind of public benefit. It was he intimidated everybody, several mayors, several governors, and frankly, if he said he wanted to do something and a mayor or a governor pushed back, he would threaten to resign. And he did it once too often, and he did it to Nelson Rockefeller, and Nelson Rockefeller said, fine. And Robert Moses couldn't believe it. And that was the beginning of his downfall in terms of public positions. But frankly, it was the citizenry that rose up against his policies. And that was primarily led by Jane Jacobs, who wrote probably the most important book in the 20th century about cities, and that's Death and Life of Great American Cities. Changed the way the world views cities. It's been translated into every language, and it is now something of a Bible for people who pretend or actually do serve positions that in an attempt to revive cities. We're now talking about main streets and small businesses and public places and mass transit. These are all things that Jane advocated in total contrast to Robert Moses. So it's a good lesson to understand where we've come from and what we're dealing with. A lot of the problems that we're dealing with today come out of his playbook, because many cities, and probably many in your state, followed his pattern, and we're all paying a big price for it today.
Was she talking about Robert Moses or Donald Trump?
Oh, please, don't even get me started on Donald Trump.
Yeah, before this show goes down the tubes with politics here, hey, Roberta, if somebody wants to get your book, what's the best way to do that?
Well, hopefully you have local bookstores. You have online opportunities. Any which way you can, and as we said, it's, we're still here, you bastards. How the citizens of New Orleans rebuilt their city, and hopefully you do have a nearby bookstore. I favor bookstores, but nevertheless, there is the internet.
Well, we have one of the best in the country in the Alabama Bookseller for sure.
Great.
All right, well, Roberta, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. You've given us more than an hour. You were a great guest. We love hearing your stories about New Orleans, and I think everybody's just pulling for the city as it continues to move forward. So thanks a lot for the time, and you have a great weekend.
I thank you, and I enjoyed the conversation immensely.
All right, thank you very much.
Roberta. Watch out for that hurricane this week.
So here's the deal. We're going to take a break for Tony Rice and the Astronomy Report. We will be right back as WeatherBrains rolls along. Edit point. And here's the end of the show in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So typically at this point we would do a weather roundup, and as you heard, we're recording the show like 10 days in advance. We're good, but we're not that good.
Come on, go for it.
No, yeah, I'll let you go for it. And Aubrey's not here. Aubrey's not been on the show since like 2007. So when she comes back, we will probably do 5 hours of email, and hopefully she'll be back with us next Monday. And we're going to blow off Picks of the Week because, again, this is a Friday night special, and I've got to go do some television here. But one of the interesting things about New Orleans to me, from a broadcast perspective, is to note their television market size drop. I've always wondered how they're doing with the media there, because before Katrina, New Orleans was ranked number 43 in the country. Today, it is ranked number 53. And falling out of the top 50 tends to cost television stations a lot of advertising money that they don't get. So I would love maybe to get some of the New Orleans TV people on here sometime to talk about that. But, Bill, we're coming up on the anniversary late this month at the end of August, so I guess we got a Katrina special coming up, huh?
Yeah, Jed Horn from the New Orleans Times-Picayune. He's the Metro editor. Margaret Orr from WDSU. And we're hoping for Mark Schiffelstein, who's the Times-Picayune reporter, who 3 years in advance of Katrina eerily and very prophetically said exactly what was going to happen. And when I read it the first time, I was blown away. I just literally, standing in Houma, Louisiana, I read the article in the Times-Picayune, and 3 years later it came true. So that's the trio that we're going to try to have on that night.
I think I've been doing that for several years with Galveston, haven't I?
And then you were successful, and they still won't let you.
Yeah, I'm not real impressed by that.
Oh, boy. I'm sorry. I've got to play it here. I mean, while I watch the cannons flashing. See, I've always got that song in the soundboard here. So Bill, what day is that show? Do we know in August?
James, it's going to be on the 27th, which is a Thursday night. That's the night we'll produce it. We could have said the 29th, which is the anniversary, but that's a Saturday night, and there's already a lot of media demand for people on that day anyway. So we're going to back it up 2 days and do it on Thursday the 27th. Okay, yeah, I see that in the calendar here, and we're going to do show 500 that Monday, the 24th. And that'll be a lot of fun. So a lot of cool things are happening here. But again, looking at the clock, I do have to go. WeatherBrains is typically done Monday nights at 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern. You can watch at live.bigbrainsmedia.com. Of course, we know most of you listen. And we're going to get back on the regular schedule next week for the live stuff. We'll be back live on Monday, the 10th of August. On the 17th of August, we'll be live. And I will be in Norman, Oklahoma. Kevin, you ought to drive up there and join us.
I'm there. What day?
It's Monday, August 17th.
James, on Monday the 10th, we're going to have James Franklin from the National Hurricane Center, so I'm really excited about that.
Awesome. Well, anyway, just send us an email. We're going to do email next week. Email at weatherbrains.com. All of our personal social media accounts are on the website, show notes as well. On behalf of the entire crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks a lot for listening. Have a wonderful week, and God bless. Thanks, guys.
Have a good weekend.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, guys. We'll see y'all. I got to go. Bye.
Bye.